In money matters, the Rand and the all-share index are proving to be resilient against global market fluctuations in this afternoon's trading session. All market indices are in the green, with financial stocks leading the pack. This as ongoing tension between Russia and Ukraine has put pressure on global markets. Let's make sense of the market moves. We're joined by Viv Govender. He's portfolio manager at Rand Swiss. Viv, thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. So the JSE is doing well so far as global markets remain shaky. How do we reconcile that?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, we are supported by the fact that we do quite well when resource prices go higher, and they have gone higher recently. South Africa's resource, has a large resource sector in the country, not as large as it used to be, but still pretty large. And this helped the market, especially over the last couple of days. I mean, yesterday the market was positive largely due to the resources sector, and though it's not as strong today, it's still positive at the moment. With the resources sector, not quite leading, financials are leading at the moment, but resources have been holding on for the last couple of days, and it's also supporting the Rand as well.
Let's take a look at news from Barloworld. They've released a statement on their operations in Russia. What are they telling us?
Basically, they're trying to say that they're pretty, insulated from what's happening. They, for instance, don't have to worry about the currency because they have agreements in dollars and then they get settled in rubles. They don't have to worry about payments because apparently they get paid by a system that doesn't quite, go through the SWIFT system, so they don't need that SWIFT system, which is basically what Russia's been barred from, or some Russian banks have been barred from using. So they're trying to say that they're pretty much, insulated from what's happening at the moment. This is a bit of a difference from what's happening, for instance, with like BP and Shell, which have basically effectively given up on their Russian assets, which are quite substantial. We're talking about, in the case of BP, I think over $20 billion. So there is a bit of a divergence here between like what this Barloworld is saying and what some of the other companies that are dealing with Russia are saying overseas.
When you say given up on their Russian assets, what do you mean?
I mean, they're putting them down as basically written them down. They're removing the people from their boards. They are, trying to get rid of their shareholdings, even though the market is significantly lower and the currency in rubles has fallen. The ruble has fallen quite dramatically. So they're basically stepping away from these assets at significant losses, giving up control and so on. And I think, and also taking significant write-downs in the valuations. The political environment right now against Russia, is quite a bit worse than you would have anticipated. For instance, look what's happening with FIFA. North Korea was still playing in the World Cup. Iran played in the World Cup. There was other stuff. Now we have FIFA, just talking about Russia. We have Switzerland basically, also joining the movement against Russia. Switzerland stayed neutral against the Nazis. So it is a lot of movement overseas against Russia, not just in terms of the normal kind of sanctions, but you've seen, for instance, Russian restaurants attacked in the US. You've seen the Russian goods taken off the shelves in places like Denmark. So this is a bit more widespread overseas than we are seeing, for instance, in South Africa.
Let's take a look at news from ABSA. Their PMI, or Purchasing Managers Index, rose to 58.6 points from 57 the previous month, rather. What drove that?
Yeah, look, it's all five sectors, basically, our components have been positive. But one thing that's, I think, really important to look at is the employment one, which is above 50, and 50, as you know, is the break-even. Above 50 is good, below 50 is going down. And employment basically is just broke above 50, and that may indicate that we are seeing a bit of a slowdown in terms of that bloodbath we've seen in the South African labor market for the last couple of years. We have unbelievably high unemployment rates. Literally, we don't understand how different they are from other parts of the world. If you go to places even places that are poor, like India and so on, the unemployment rate is much, much lower there. You go to the developed world, the rates that we are seeing in South Africa before COVID, if you cut them in half, there'd be a crisis in places like the US and Europe. We are used to 20+% unemployment rates. In fact, now we're above 37% unemployment rate in the narrow definition, and that's just a ridiculously high level. But the fact that we are seeing maybe a slowdown in the fall is a big positive, even though it's not by far the biggest driver in that particular improvement.
MTN Ghana has released their results. They've managed to grow their subscriber base. What else can we glean from their results?
Look, Ghana, West Africa is an important, region for MTN. Of course, their operations in Nigeria as well, which have caused trouble in the past, but also has been very lucrative. Look, they bring about $1 billion in, so it's about 15 billion rands or so over the next 5 years. It's not, huge, but it's just substantial. And I think that is an important move by the company. I mean, they have, a large, for instance, not just a subscriber base, also people that are using, for instance, their mobile, financial platform as well. There's over 10 or 11 million people there. I mean, despite the fact I think they're going to introduce like a 1 or 2% tax on this from the Ghanaian government. But I think that look at what like a company like MTN is able to do in Ghana, it's actually to a certain extent more advanced in terms of its penetration to that market than it is even in South Africa. Because I mean, some of the services that they offer there in South Africa are barely taking up mobile banking via your cell phone and so on. At least using the cell phone provider as your primary financial institution, as opposed to, for instance, you might use an app, sort of Standard Bank app on your cell phone, but you aren't banking with MTN and you're not banking with Vodacom and so on.
Just finally, I'd like to pick up on what we were talking about in terms of Russia, seeing companies saying that, they're giving up on their assets in that country, restaurants being attacked, Russian restaurants being attacked in the United States, for example. Economically, can the country afford this move that they have, shown us? And also, what does it mean for them in the future? Will this bring them, or will this, as a result, bring the country to its knees economically?
Yeah, look, I mean, we better hope not, because, I mean, can you imagine, for instance, Saddam was saying if he had nuclear weapons at the end, he would have probably used them. If the pain is enough in Russia, the chance of something nuclear happening is high. And that is a real concern. I mean, Russia has about half the world's nuclear weapons. Okay, Russia and the US together have 90%, but Russia has about 500 more than the Americans. They are pretty large nuclear power. They're a weak military power, it seems, from what we've seen from the Ukrainians, basically being able to hold up much longer and much better than had been anticipated. The Ukrainians seem to be more advanced in technology. They seem to be better trained soldiers, more motivated. And of course, the backlash economically and also in social media and in other factors, like I said, FIFA and, for instance, the attacks on the restaurants. We haven't seen this anywhere else. We haven't seen, for instance, this kind of like negative, backlash against the country for quite some time. I mean, you're talking about something similar to what was against South Africa in apartheid times. You don't want to be, associated with anyone South African, if you're international, because of the taint of it. It wasn't seen, for instance, when, for instance, Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia or, other countries had issues with the Americans. Or with the West, for instance. But the Russia backlash has been much stronger than I think had been anticipated, and that is something I think has to be played out. I don't think the Kremlin basically understood or believed that this would happen as badly as it has.
Viv Govender, thank you very much, Portfolio Manager at Rand Swiss.